What's up everyone, Darcblade returning with my Mass Effect 3 multiplayer class guide. Today we are going to be taking a look at one of the toughest classes out there, the Krogan Sentinel. If Spec right, this class can solely rely on weapons and not have to worry about using powers at all. Now as always, I spec my classes for silver and gold mode, and the Krogan Sentinel is no different. There seems to be two specs going around that are the best for the Krogan Sentinel. The first being a tank spec, the second being a spec that relies on incinerate and powers a little bit more than the tank spec. Anyway, I am going to cover the tank spec as I think this is the more beneficial spec for the Krogan Sentinel. What you have to do, you have to spec tech armor out to maximum. You have to make sure you put points in all the damage reduction abilities. You can put a little bit into the improved melee, as melee comes in a little bit more useful than the power increased damage in the tech tree, as you're not going to be using any powers as the Krogan Sentinel tank. Completely skip out incinerate. Skipping this out means you don't have to rely on your power recharge timer at all. Max out lift grenades for that extra bit of damage, especially in terms of emergency damage when you need to give a lot of damage out at once. Max out Krogan Berserker, going into specifically the weapon damage. You can skip the weight reduction abilities as you don't need them because you're not relying on your power recharge timer at all. Max out fitness for health and shields. This will make your Krogan Sentinel a bullet sponge. Combining the fitness with the maxed out tech armor means you're going to be a great tanking class. Weapons are very important for this spec. You need to equip yourself with the best weapons you've got. A nice shotgun for the close range situations, and maybe a sniper rifle for the long range situations. The Krogan Sentinel tank spec does not rely on power recharge speed, so do not worry about what you equipped. There is a second Krogan Sentinel spec where you could rely on incinerate more than heavy weaponry in that, but this means you have to take points out of other places, like for example you could reduce the points in lift grenades or a bit in Krogan Berserker, or if you feel comfortable enough, maybe a little bit in fitness or the tech armor protection. But I personally prefer the Krogan Sentinel tank spec that you've seen here, as other races and other classes fulfill the power roles a lot better than the Krogan Sentinel does. Also, the Krogan Sentinel has incredibly high health and high shields, making them perfect for the tank role. Anyway, enough of the Krogan specs, let's get into the Krogan Sentinel powers, shall we? Firstly, tech armor. This is a excellent survivability move, especially because you're freeing yourself up from having to rely on powers, which means the fact that your power speed is reduced whilst wearing tech armor is completely irrelevant for this class. Tech armor itself will reduce the amount of incoming damage you take, but spec'd into durability means that this is going to be increased so much. For the Krogan Sentinel as well, it's also wise to maybe go into melee damage, especially seeing as power damage is not going to be relevant for this class. Melee kills are not always advisable, especially at the higher difficulties, but at the lower difficulties or when it's safe enough, melee kills are a good option for any Krogan, as after you get 3 melee kills with a Krogan, you enter a frenzy mode, increasing your melee damage considerably, as well as reducing your incoming damage. So, speccing into the increased melee damage in the tech armor is a nice option. I've covered Incinerate in other videos for other classes, so I won't go into it too much here. Incinerate, if you did really want to take it, you could maybe take a few points out of lift grenades or maybe Krogan Berserker and put them into Incinerate if you felt you really needed it. Incinerate can be used to activate tech combos, especially if you play with a lot of other engineers or techie type classes. It could also potentially be used to activate enemies that have been affected by your lift grenades, activating a biotic explosion. Incinerate itself can actually be used to set up a tech combo as well. It's called a fire explosion. You hit someone with Incinerate and then you hit them up with a follow-up move with the Krogan Sentinel. It would be the lift grenades, and then if they die from that, it will create a fire explosion that will hit anyone around the person who has just died. Unfortunately, this is not as easy as it sounds to pull off, and in all fairness, for the Krogan Sentinel, it's probably more beneficial and more efficient to just destroy people with weaponry. The third and final ability the Krogan Sentinel has is lift grenades. These are a nice source of damage, and the fact that they do not rely on power recharge speed means you can get these off as often as you can as long as you're close to an ammo box. You need the ammo box to constantly replenish your lift grenades as much as possible. Unfortunately, at the higher difficulties, it doesn't replenish all your grenades at once, so use them sparingly. Use them when there's a large cluster of people around, or maybe when you're up against a harder opponent like an Atlas or Banshee or Brute or something like that. You could of course as well use them to activate your teammates' biotic and tech combos, but this, to be honest, is not the most efficient way to probably use the grenades, as you haven't got an infinite supply of them unless you're standing on an ammo crate, and even then it takes a little time for the grenade to actually respawn in the ammo crate before you can pick it up again. As for what you spec into in the lift grenade tree, I personally find that it's best to spec for damage. You can maybe spec for increased grenades and so on and so forth, but increased damage is always constant. And if you spare your grenades to when you most need them, having that extra bit of high damage is really, really worth it. Now, the Krogan as a race are a hardy race, put it that way. They have probably the most highest health and shields out of any of the races in the game. They probably have the best melee as well out of any race in the game. They have a Krogan headbutt, which is a strong standing headbutt that takes a lot of damage off opponents. And they also have a Krogan charge. This is an amazing ability. It's their heavy melee, where they'll charge at someone, knocking them flying. And if it doesn't knock them flying, it normally staggers opponents, leaving them open so you can hit them with a full blast from your shotgun or whatever weapon you're using. After getting 3 of these melee kills, you'll activate the Krogan Frenzy. Your screen will start glowing and your Krogan will do so much more melee damage, and it will also reduce the amount of damage incoming on your Krogan. Combine this with the Krogan Sentinel's tech armor that has maxed out durability, as well as fitness, which has got maxed out health and shields, means that your Krogan Sentinel is going to be taking a lot less damage than any other class out there. The only downside about being any type of Krogan is the fact that they have reduced mobility. They are slow buggers. They are also quite big and thus quite ponderous. They're not exactly the fastest to get about the battlefield. So if you like your quick speeds, then the Krogan is not for you, unfortunately. But this is their only shortcoming. Their pros far outweigh their cons, and they can probably go toe-to-toe with almost any enemy in the game. Now, the Krogan Sentinel, the spec I've gone for here, relies solely on weaponry, so pick the best weapons you can. Like I've gone for a nice close range shotgun for the close range combat and a sniper rifle for the long range combat. If it was on a smaller map, I might have taken a strong heavy assault rifle, maybe the Saber. I would also probably combine this with armor piercing ammo, or ammo that could set off your teammates' tech or biotic explosion combos. Anyway, let's go back and recap the Krogan Sentinel's abilities and powers. Firstly, you have tech armor. This is a great survivability tool, as it reduces incoming damage, especially if you spec into durability. You can also increase your power or melee damage through this ability. I go for melee damage, as the Krogans are great with their melee. The second ability is Incinerate. I have completely skipped this out, as the spec I have gone for is a tanking spec that relies completely on weaponry and not powers, so I don't have to worry about power recharge speeds. The third ability are lift grenades. These are a nice source of damage and don't rely on a power recharge timer either to use. Max out Krogan Berserker so all your weapon damage is increased, as you're going to be relying on weapons and not powers at all. In fitness, go for health and shields, as being able to take damage is one of the greatest advantages of the Krogan Sentinel. So this has been the Krogan Sentinel, a great damage sponge and tanking class, and if you're attempting any of the harder modes out there, stick him up front where the damage is thickest. Try to get him to draw fire away from your weaker teammates. I've been Darcblade, bringing you my guide to the Krogan Sentinel. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.